The second Saturday of June is officially Pollyanna Glad Day, named for the famous literary character Pollyanna, and I share a little bit more about that day in this short. But I have recently done a reread of these books, so I thought I'd share a little bit about them here today. If you don't know the basic story of Pollyanna, it's a lot like many of the books from that time period, where there is a young girl who is newly orphaned who shows up in a new town where the people around her are sort of sad or grouchy, and she manages to cheer them up and create a change in their hearts. In this case, 11-year-old Pollyanna comes to live with her wealthy, strict Aunt Polly. Side note, Pollyanna's mom had two sisters, Polly and Anna, which is how Pollyanna gets her name. And Pollyanna manages to cheer up the town and create positive change, even eventually with her Aunt Polly. And then towards the end of the book, Pollyanna's optimism is tested after an accident, but everything ends up happily ever after. I am a sucker for these orphan girls cheering up the people around her sort of books, so I grew up watching the 1960 film version of Pollyanna, probably on repeat at times, but I did not actually read the books until adulthood. And even though the 1913 book and then its 1915 sequel were huge successes in their time, I feel like I just don't hear about a lot of people who are that familiar with the books, or if they are familiar or try to read them, they just tend to find Pollyanna's unrelenting optimism to be a bit grating. I personally really enjoy these books, but I do kind of get where people are coming from with that. I would say though, it's not even really Pollyanna's Glad game, which if you're not familiar with it, that's sort of the central focus of what Pollyanna's all about, is this game that she and her father used to play where they find something to be glad about in every situation. So she shares this game and this story with the people around her, and then they're all changed for the better. But honestly, in the book, as opposed to the movie, or at least the movie version that I'm familiar with, Pollyanna actually shows quite a bit more emotion about missing her father. And I almost feel like her playing the game is her way of staying connected to or honoring her father. And she doesn't always find glad in everything, and she definitely disagrees with some people when she doesn't feel like they're playing the game quite right. Like, she will never find a reason to be glad for herself or somebody else of like comparing and saying that their situation is better than someone else's. That's not how she plays the game. And she herself goes through a couple different periods of finding it really hard to play the game, whether that's for herself or for the people around her. But what I think can feel a bit contrived or kind of annoying is her complete naivete. And sometimes it's kind of part of the comedy in the book. Like, for instance, her Aunt Polly is trying to teach her to keep the windows closed, and as sort of a punishment to Pollyanna, has her read this fact book all about flies and the germs they carry. And Pollyanna is, like, no joke, overflowing with joy about getting to read this book about flies. And yes, she is young and from a different time, so there is that to consider. But I also see how some of that can be maybe a bit annoying to some readers. I kind of just roll with it because even if it does feel a bit far-fetched at times, it's really sweet to see this sparkly-eyed young girl look at life from a different perspective and help others do that too. The books, of course, are of their time period, which means that some of the ideas and language in there don't quite line up with our current world. I don't want to start listing that because I feel like I will forget some things. But I will say that in terms of some of the phrasings, there is a word used quite often in the book for the word exclaim, and it is a word that we of our current world would just not use in that context. Also, romantic interests are always referred to as lovers. And then this one is just kind of fresh on my mind because it was at the end of the Pollyanna Grows Up book, so the part I just read recently. And that is that one of the characters, Jimmy Bean, who is the same age or maybe even slightly younger than Pollyanna, is talking with her, and they're both about 20 years old at this time. And he keeps referring to her as sweet little girl. And I don't know what, just kind of drove me crazy because he says it a lot. All of this aside, though, I really do enjoy these books. I prefer the first one. The second one, like I said, is called Pollyanna Grows Up. But actually, for like the first half of the book, Pollyanna is still young. And then halfway through the book, it does this fast forward, and Pollyanna is now 20 years old. But I will say that a lot of parts of it almost felt like the author was answering or responding to criticisms or questions that might have come up after her first book was released. So, for instance, this woman that Pollyanna goes to live with keeps saying, well, I don't want anyone preaching gladness to me. And Pollyanna does see some people who are facing some seriously tough times, and she's just unable to even play the game at that point. And then when she's older, a lot of the characters around her have concerns about what this unrelenting optimism will look like in a more grown version of Pollyanna as opposed to her as a child. I don't know, it's just the way it was presented. A lot of it felt like the author was just kind of responding to what people might have said after her first book. And then also the second book has a lot of really bizarre confusions, especially towards the end, that just, some of them are really, really strange. And then everything ties up super perfectly right at the end. I don't really mind it all that much, but I could see how it might not be for everyone. So I feel like I'm not really selling these books here. And honestly, I do not think they're for everyone. But if you're up for a sweet read and you realize that these are of a different time period and they are about a Pollyanna, then I think you will be really glad you read them. Thank you so much for joining me for this. I have wanted to talk about Pollyanna and these Pollyanna books for a long time, so I feel really excited to be able to have this opportunity. I have not made it out to Littleton, New Hampshire, where the Pollyanna statue is and the Glad Day celebration is. That is where Eleanor Porter was born. I really, really hope to go there someday. I do have this button that was given to me by somebody who did get to go there, so fingers crossed someday. But until then, I am just so glad that I was able to have this opportunity to share about these books. Thank you.